think that Newcastle has always been out on a limb as far as getting talent to the people that matter. It's always been the case that bands have got to go to London to actually make something of themselves. And in a way I can understand why. That's where the big gigs are, that's where the record producers are, that's where the PR guys, they're all down there. But there's so much talent up here. It would be good if they just thought, let's see what's happening in the northeast and spend some time up here. You know, you've got a small pocket of North Shields, which is attracting so much attention at the minute. You've got El Devine, you've got Hector Gannett, you've got Liam Fender, and of course you've got Liam's brother, Sam Fender, who's doing massive things. And they've all come from one town round about the same time, and that talent is just bubbling. Now, Sam has made it really big, the other El Devine has, Liam's on his way, Hector Gannett's on their way. But surely somebody in London should be saying, what else is in the northeast? Why don't we go up there and find out what's happening? And if that happens, you're going to get a lot more bands who will get an exposure and therefore making it through to the top.
So I think when we first started out, we realised that a lot of artists in the northeast would just like put out a song and like just leave it and like expect it to do numbers or expect it to do views. And the whole marketing side of it is like what our knowledge mainly lies in. So we really want to focus on the marketing and PR side of it for artists and just encourage them to look beyond the release and kind of create like a whole strategy basically. And I think the mission is just to like empower artists and like make them realise that they can make money from it, they can make a living for it. They just need to kind of have everything in place to do that properly. And I think a big thing for us as well is like we work mainly with rap, R&B and Afrobeat artists. That's the artists that are on our roster. And we just want to create a space for them in the Northeast because there's so many talented artists, producers, songwriters. But I think people just see the Northeast as an indie kind of market. So we're really trying to focus more on that side of things and get it in front of major labels and stuff like that so they realise that it's here.
Yeah, so the BBC Music Introducing Show is all about shining a light on emerging artists. For me in particular, it's throughout Teesside, County Durham and North Yorkshire, but there is a station for every regional area, so it's all about shining a light and celebrating all the amazing talent that's on our doorstep. Working in radio was never a part of my plan. When Rhiann Thompson, the previous host of the BBC Music Introducing Show, had to sadly step down from the role, I was almost scared that somebody that didn't care about the area would end up in that position, which kind of inspired me to apply for it, as well as some outside sources telling me to go for it. I never really thought it'd be something that I'd enjoy or be good at, but what I did know I was passionate about was representing the area and shining a light on all the positivity that goes on here, because if we leave it to the other forms of media, we know what happens. We just get bad press every single time.
How you feeling? How you enjoying this BBC Music Introducing live event so far? Has it been good? Did you enjoy Moonwax? Now, are you ready for the next act? You've all been so good tonight, so much energy. Now we've got an electric Brat Pop duo about to come on this stage. I want to hear some noise on the count of three. Are you ready? On the count of three, I want to hear some noise from Zella. 1, 2, 3! Let's have it.
Cause we got tempted, but I need to leave. I can't be seen with you, it's crazy. I'm back here again, it's after 10. Boy, we need to let...
So Generator, as I said, it's a creative and talent development agency. So it's a music organisation that is supported and supporting of the creative industries. We've kind of got one mission, and that is to create a sustainable music industry in the Northeast that's accessible to all. So that kind of means building and growing on the infrastructure that we have in the Northeast, making sure that it connects really well with the rest of the UK, builds its reputation. And kind of when I talk about infrastructure, that means like the supply chain or the pathways within the industry. So making that all stronger so that people don't feel like if you want to work in the music industry, you have to move and live in a different city. We want to build the infrastructure so that there are enough opportunities and there's enough pathways to sustain a career in the music industry, whether you're an artist or a videographer or you work as a technician. There's so many different jobs that you can have in the music industry, and they all support one another. So Generator, our mission is to make sure that that's a sustainable and well-built infrastructure. So that's kind of what we're doing at the moment, so that people can access the music industry and have a lifelong career.
I think the Northeast music scene is very unique in terms of we've got so many artists right now bursting out of the gates, really changing genres in my opinion, and I think that boils down to people really starting to be proud of where they're from. For a long period of time, everyone wanted to put on London accents, even American accents I've heard. Now people are coming out with pure Geordie accents, pure Teesside accents, or whatever accent that they naturally have. And I think that's a big part of it, being proud of where you're from, who you are, and the people around you. And right now there's a real sense of community spirit bubbling up in the Northeast. And I think that's something that we've always been known for up in the North, is our sense of community, where maybe some areas down south might lack it a little bit. We have that in abundance here, and it's now time for the industry to reach the same levels as our community spirit has.
So there's a few things I would say that have been a struggle being a musician, and I guess particularly in the Northeast. One being like the finance side of things, like being able to put money behind yourself, like the cost at the start of my career, like before having my own studio, and my producer Phil the Beat, who's like one of my best mates, he's now does all the production for my songs and saves me a lot of money. But prior to all of that, it cost so much going into these, fair enough they're amazing, these studios and that, but it did cost a lot. And then on top of that, the mixing, the mastering, and then the photo shoots, and then the travelling to go to the gigs, like the amount of times I've drove to London and back in one day, or like one time I'm sure we went to Liverpool, London, and then back in one day, and it was crazy, and like going around handing out CDs with personalised ribbons with my name on, like going a bit extra and over the top, but just to try and stand out and make people want to listen to my songs and stuff. So I guess finding the money to put behind myself, which even now, because of the way Spotify is and stuff, you don't get much revenue. Like one of my earlier songs, I remember being so buzzing, it got like 200,000 plays, and I was like, yes, I got 98 quid from that 200,000 plays, and I was like, what? So I think unless you are able to get into the millions of streams, and I do kind of think with maybe without a record label or some, financial support, that is a bit of a struggle, but I just tell myself do it because you love it. And the response I get at gigs and even on social media from my followers just makes you want to keep going, because they are the people that are downloading it, even if it's not millions.
We have talent here. We have a lot of talent here, and sometimes not enough opportunity with the likes of, I know London's a big music place, a lot of things come out of London. Manchester is a big place, a lot of things come out of the Manchester area. But I would love things to just start taking off from the Northeast. I know Sam Fender, obviously a couple of years back, he broke through, which is great. but we have a lot more talent in the Northeast, and I think it needs looked at. We need more opportunities, I think. I think somewhere down the line we may need to book a venue for original bands or artists to come in and invite like record labels or music writers or producers and showcase our talent a bit more. There's only so much you can do on your own by promotion, writing, releasing and promoting it on your own, being unsigned and independent. Yeah, we have to showcase a lot more in front of like music management, record labels, publishing deals, sync opportunities. There's a lot of things out there which we need to just step up to the mark and move forward with. But yeah, I love working with Northeast talent, Northeast based writers, doing covers with up and coming singers. You know, my shows, I always try and give opportunities to up and coming singers for support slots on my shows as well.
Getting contacts and like networking with people can be quite difficult because I live out in the middle of nowhere, so I don't actually live in Newcastle, so it's quite a nightmare to get in and stuff. But I think things like funding is really hard to come by, which I think a lot of people don't realise, and just getting yourself out there. I mean, social media is helping a lot more with that these days, but yeah, I think it can be quite difficult.
I think the challenges for me, although there are like ones that would affect other people, I think I talked a lot about when I was at uni about being like had intersectional challenges, so like being female and being mixed or black in like a city where a lot of like white indie music is very pushed, and that's kind of like seems to be the scene in that I kind of see from Newcastle, like people who are making it and breaking. I think that would be the main challenge, but then I've also, when I think about it, I think the challenge also comes from within, and like my own confidence and my own like drive can sometimes like let my own self down. So I think in a way, yeah, like there's the whole thing of like moving to other cities to like make your break and finding your scene, but then actually for me it's more about like creating the scene here and then like going outwards from there. Does that make sense?
Some of the challenges and obstacles we face in the North East right now is that there's not been many artists that have went out and got right to the top and left a blueprint, especially in the rap scene. I know now we have the likes of Sam Fender, and there has been people in the past, don't get me wrong, but we need people to come back into the community and pass on the information that they've learned from going on tour around the world, from working with these big massive labels. That's what we need now. And I think, I know money is a huge obstacle. I know money is a huge obstacle for many artists, and I think more funding needs to come up here in the North East so these artists don't end up burning themselves out trying to work 2-3 jobs at a time just to be able to fund a little music video, be able to fund the marketing. That needs to come to a change, and hopefully we're going to start seeing that with the likes of PRS and Help for Musicians, for instance, really focusing on the North in general right now. It's beautiful to see, but I do know that a lack of money is a dream killer for a lot of artists, and with 40% of young people being born into poverty in Middlesbrough alone at the moment, which is the highest rates of child poverty throughout the whole country, it really does worry me that there's going to be a generation of young people coming up that can't afford instruments, they can't afford music lessons, they can't afford studio time, that's where these grassroots organisations that I've spoke about earlier do kind of give me a tiny bit of hope, because I know there is great people trying at the moment, but there really needs to be a focus on funding in the North East to make sure these people that are being born below that threshold into poverty really have a chance to pursue the dreams. And we all know how music and the arts is so important for the community.
Since X Factor, He Knows She Knows has had lots of support from the Northeast music scene. It has had zero help from the Northeast gatekeepers. I think the reason why we got a bit of stick, because I did a show before, I did Must Be the Music and got the same sort of reaction. I think there's a lot of musicians that work really, really hard to get to where they are in the music scene, and someone from a TV reality show can go on in 6 months, do a TV show and be bigger than they have been for 10 years. And some people can get jealous of it, some people can get angry at you for it, some people can say you're a sellout because you've done it.
They're just confused.
You can
They're
just,
like,
you know,
how?
you'll always have that stamp on you. You'll always have that mark on you, that scar from that you've done that, and people will always judge you by that. I think there's a few artists that have managed to shake that off. Like Karen Hardin was an X Factor contestant, but people don't realise she was an X Factor contestant. There's so many. All of the girls from the Saturdays were X Factor contestants. They just didn't get any. Like, there's so many people who you know as stars that were X Factor contestants that you just don't know were X Factor contestants.
I think the music scene in the Northeast, as much as it's supportive, I think one of the things we both agree on is education side. Like, in school, don't get us wrong, we learnt about music, but it wasn't necessarily pushed. It wasn't a priority, and there's so many creative people in the Northeast. I feel like education-wise hasn't got that, where down south you have so many like the Brit School, for example, and massive schools for artistic. So many schools for artistic people to express themselves, and I feel it's very much lacking in that. In the Northeast, there's not as much support.
Like, I did GCSE music, but
if you want to
that
do,
just made me go straight away from music so much.
It's more classical music based, which don't get us wrong, that's your thing. That's amazing for you.
Unreal.
But
I feel like if you're just someone that's creative and wants to sing, or like even writers, like I was writing when I was in school, but I didn't feel,
education,
I didn't connect with
system
that
is just
at school at all. And if anything, it made me sort of stray away from my musical side. Like, I think I had a good phase at school.
You feel like a bit of an outcast, don't you? You feel like, because you're the creative one in school, where I feel like bigger sisters, like bigger cities like Manchester or London, like everyone you know is doing something. I feel more like expressing themselves or doing something artistic in some sort of way. Where here you feel a bit more like, I'm a singer, don't look at me.
It's like, it's great, we've got open mics and like Teen Star.
There's loads of open mics on at the moment. I think a lot of people are pushing for that.
Yeah.
To get people. There's some people that I don't know what I'm
Which
saying
is
now,
great.
but like so scared to come up and sing. Which is sad in a way, because I feel like that should be pushed. That should be a thing at school.
Yeah, just like confidence and musicality in general, and like just being able to
so many people listen
express.
to so many people listen to music. Teachers will listen to music, and it's just like it's just forgotten about.
Yeah. I get you.
I think there is still a bit of a stigma about the Northeast in general, that we're sort of you know, people have a very sort of one-dimensional view of what the Northeast is, I guess, and you know, I guess we get sort of stereotyped a lot. If you actually look at it, like, there's not an awful lot of representation especially within like the arts and stuff. There's not an awful lot of representation from up here. So I think that's one of the difficulties. Like I say, I think once somebody makes it from here, I think it will sort of open the floodgates and hopefully will open people's eyes to other people from up here, like it has in other scenes. And I think another one of the difficulties we face as well is, I think there's a funding gap in the Northeast. I think that we you know, don't see the levels of funding across the board in all sort of sectors like the other areas of the country do, and that trickles down into all sorts of things. That trickles down into, you know, spaces for kids to hang out and meet each other, creative spaces for people to get together and do things. And I think that there's a big sort of, the Northeast is kind of left out of that a lot. In general, especially in terms of like the government and stuff, we get constantly sort of left behind and forgotten about a lot of the time. So I feel like just the systemic like issues that are in the Northeast are a big problem for Northeast artists. And I think there is like a little thing in terms of like the bigger sort of national picture. I think that like a lot of people don't want to like something until they know other people like it. So I think because there isn't like a big artist from the Northeast within the sort of rap hip hop sort of sphere, that I feel like on the national scale we are kind of overlooked a bit like that as well. Whereas if we get you know, I keep using Bugsy Malone, I'll use a different example. Like if we get like a Lady Leisha, for example, from Birmingham or whatever, I think that, you know, I think that once one person gets eyes on them, I think that people will just, their minds will just open to the possibility that there is music up here that they will like. Because, like I said before, people up here make just as good as, if not better, music than people in every other city in the country. So there's no reason why people shouldn't get onto it, I guess.
I think some of the challenges that are faced by artists and producers in the Northeast is that there isn't the same apparatus as there is down south. There definitely isn't. And there also isn't the same culture. In London, everyone thinks they're a big deal and like they're doing something. And whilst that gets really grating and annoying after a while, that also leads to a situation where people feel inspired by other people and pushed further. And that also leads to a situation where there's more industry knowledge floating around. So like one thing I definitely see from artists everywhere, all over the place, is a complete inability to market their music. And I don't think the Northeast is any different. You have artists who'll drop £800 on a music video and then they will post about it twice on social media and be surprised that they're not blowing up, and it doesn't really make sense. But I mean, I think one thing that the Northeast is really lacking is that industry that does exist in London, that sort of, it's not the major labels I'm talking about, it's all the other people around that, all these much smaller people who are sort of going around trying to find an artist they can develop and break. There just isn't as much of that up here. And I also think, you know, it's difficult to make a name for yourself around here when, like, Chloe's constantly being put on lineups with metal bands. And it's like, I don't know who thought that was a good idea. I don't know who thinks that's respectful to the audience. Like, the audience have paid and travelled to watch this gig, and then we're putting an R&B artist with a metal band. It doesn't make any sense to me. And I think that was not a problem that I ever encountered in London. Like, there was always enough R&B artists for the R&B gig and enough metal artists for the metal gig. And I think, how are you meant to make fans if half the people at your gig are not interested in your music? You can't. So I think that's a massive issue that people are fighting up against here. And I think that's kind of a thing of scale. Like, how can you put on lots of good R&B gigs if there's only 10 good R&B artists in the city? Like, you can't really. You've got to really focus down. And I think, you know, that's where, like, I think I really see a future for this region, is if the artists that are good can band together and can actually make a name for themselves as a scene, as something that has value together, not on the edge of metal bands, not on the edge of artists that don't have anything to do with them.
Like, it's all built around London. I feel like that's where it all kind of starts and that's where it stays. And all of the artists are friends and went to school together and they grew up in the same estates and stuff like that. So it's so cliquey. So after I graduated and I moved to London, I had to kind of break through that, but it was difficult because, like I said, everybody would rather help their friend than somebody that's not from around there. But I persevered and I relocated to London just so that I could kind of break through some way, somehow, and I was able to do it, thankfully. But it was difficult. It was definitely difficult because I was always the outsider for a long time. But I get along with people and I love meeting new people, so that helped us massively. So that kind of helped me jump over that hurdle. But it was definitely a struggle from being outside of London and trying to make it, especially in R&B, the genre that I was trying to make it in, because the centre of it is London and everybody's already there.
You don't know just what you do for me. You don't know what I go through.
I reckon, like, when I first moved here, I was doing a job that I didn't really like, but I was just trying to fund the music. That's how it always is. You got to do a job, pay your rent, pay the bills. So the first bit was hard because I was like moving away from something I knew. Still trying to find my feet, but I was like just looking around for like contacts, network, like building from the ground up again. But yeah, in terms of opportunities, it's mad. Like, I do soul music, so it's really good for me here. Like, there's a lot of opportunities. I started off in jam nights around London. That was really, really good. Just met loads of musicians. Peng Fem Jam was one that I went to quite a bit. It's like an all-female jam night. So I just thought, I'm just gonna stick into there. I'm just gonna meet loads of people and just see what happens. And yeah, from there I found like a lot of my bandmates that I'm with now. So I just kind of pinched them from jam nights. And now I've got a band. So I reckon from about February time, that's when I started like hitting it with like the live shows. But it took me about 6 months to like start. So it's hard, it is hard, especially if you don't really know anyone. That I had to completely build again. So yeah, I mean, it's been hard. That's all I can say.
I always used to think like if I move to London, I'll get noticed. And my theory was like, because I used to start out busking as well when I was like 17. And my theory was like, busking on the streets of Durham and Newcastle, who's going to walk past you that's going to notice you? Whereas in London, I was thinking, oh, some record label executive could be walked past because it's London, you know what I mean? But at the same time, so there is a bit more opportunity down there, I think. But it's about bringing that here and also us artists not migrating to London, I think, and like building the scene in the Northeast, because it is there. It's just building that community, which I think is really quite strong and in a sense. I think all the artists really support each other in the Northeast. But I think it's just making us bigger, a bigger, more powerful force.
I think here is like, what I like about Newcastle is that it's a grassroots music scene. So like, you start out there, you get to know the scene super quick. You know who's like the people to know, if you know what I mean. So, you know, something like Newism that I did in Newcastle was like North East Women in Soul. It's like Frankie Joblin, Georgia May, Falu, and we all did this like night of soul music, and that's like something that would happen probably more in Newcastle. It's really hard to step away from the competition in London. So a lot of people think it's a competition and think that it's all about industry, whereas I'd argue that I like that more about the Newcastle scene. Like, I think everyone can grow without being in a competition with each other. I think that, you know, we can grow together, help each other out in the same situations. But I definitely say it's more competitive here and more people like trying to make it into like a very solid career. But I don't know, I prefer the grassroots approach. I think either way you can have a career, but I think here it's like you have a manager, a booking agent, and it's like very like systematic, that's how I'd say it. And everyone seems to have one, and I'm like, what is this place? I'm used to the like, you know, just see what happens, do some live shows, have a good time. If it goes well, it goes well. But yeah, it's very like cutthroat, that's how I'd describe it. But I think when you come into a scene like this, you just gotta make your own thing. So I put on my own shows, and I'm trying to make that more of a thing here. So I've got a thing. Can I swear on this? Yeah. So I've got a show. Good. So I've got this like new night that I'm putting on. It's called Fuck You Soul. It's actually like, it's rooted in what I did in Newcastle with Newism. It's like trying to give opportunities out, because I've seen how hard it is to like make opportunities or get them through a promoter here. Like, you've got to have a following, you've got to have a lot in place before people take you seriously. So I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna make a night, give everyone opportunities, like try and pull people up. So I did my first one at Paper Just Vintage in Hackney recently, and it sold out, but it was like very much like everyone on the bill, other than me obviously, I've been around a bit longer, but everyone on the bill was like completely like hadn't really got any music out, was starting out. And yeah, it just shows like you can sell out a show, you don't need to have like 30k followers on Instagram, you can just do it grassroots and find people and make a good night, you know?
A lot of people, it's easy to think, oh yeah, London, big city, but people need to realise here, it's so much easier to be a big fish in such a little pond, whereas London, there's thousands of people doing what you're doing. It's harder to stand out, it's harder to be special in a place like London, whereas here, it's so much more accessible. Even with things like funding, it's so much easier to get in places like this because people are looking to fund places like this. People are looking for artists from these places. Whereas London's oversaturated with musicians. Like, you're never going to ever hear anyone say, I'm looking for an artist in London. That's not going to happen. Like, maybe other places, like Newcastle, like Leeds, like wherever. But I think being here is actually a benefit. But people don't realise that.
I get the feeling something's going wrong. Might just be my fault.
obviously Sam Fender and people like that, like we're just seen for kind of an indie market, and I think maybe Newcastle isn't seen as the most diverse city really. I think now it definitely is, and I think you can see it more when you're looking at the rappers that are coming out and the singers and stuff like that. But I think generally, like the Northeast, when you look at the people who go to gigs, it's mainly like middle-aged people that are there for the indie artists. They'll go to like the likes of Twisterella, Stockton Collins, stuff like that. And if you look at them lineups, it's majority indie artists. Whereas there is so many like rap artists and stuff like that. I just think people haven't realised that yet, and it just needs a bit more push. I think especially with the marketing and stuff like that, for people to realise that it's here.
The challenges that we face as rappers in the Northeast, it's not as bad now, but like a few years ago, and then obviously before I even started, it's just not that big of like a rap market. We have like a bunch of indie bands that are like that do well, but it's just a very like indie like guitar music type of place, especially like Newcastle. And we just don't get that much attention from the rest of the country unless you like go out and get it, which like some people do. They manage to like network with people from London or like Manchester, places like that, and then other people kind of just do their like open mics and their shows in Newcastle and stuff like that. So yeah, it's just it's a small area. People don't know that it's like a lot of people. I've heard people say that Newcastle's like countryside and stuff like that, thinking that it's just like not a city. It doesn't have like an urban scene or anything like that. So it's just about, you know, perspective from the rest of the country, I guess.
One thing I will say is, as much as I think everyone, like there's so many talented people here, but I think a lot of it is the quality of what we put out, because if you want to impress people from other regions, other places, quality is very important, not necessarily quantity, because we're not just trying to, if you're trying to have like a national reach or an international reach, I think we need to perfect our craft first, because I would rather take a 1 year break from music to make sure everything's perfect, well, as good as I can get, because nothing can get perfect, then just constantly releasing mediocre things. But I do think everyone's talented. It's about the finer details, like the mixing and mastering, it's about that. It's also the promotion. It's not being focused on, I think, because there's not as many industry professionals over here, I think people don't necessarily realise that there's a lot into making music and being someone in the music industry other than making music. Like there's the marketing behind it, there's all that stuff behind it, but I feel like because we lack industry professionals over here, I think that's what hinders it. But that's obviously not our fault that industry professionals aren't coming over here. That's, again, the big bosses.
So what will you say to the big bosses then?
I think they need to stop overlooking the Northeast, because there is really talented people here. And I think they'll regret it eventually, like taking so long to look in the Northeast, because at the same time, I do think every city's having its moment or had its moment. Like London, like always gone. But then you've also had Manchester, it's had its moment. Leeds, you've got some artists from over there, you've got Thames from over there. And I think it's a matter of time that Newcastle gets people looking at it. The Northeast in general.
When you take Sam Fender as a great case study of this, is that from what I know of Sam's journey, I don't know Sam well at all, but I know a few people that know Sam, and I know a few of the people that work with Sam, so I'm pretty sure that his promoter is the same person that promotes like Ed Sheeran and stuff. So he's in that world, you know, he's in the pop world. And I think Sam was discovered when he was like pretty, you know, grassroots, like he was doing the pubs and clubs in Newcastle. But because he got picked up by the industry, like that happens so little in Newcastle because of where it's situated in the UK, in my opinion. Like, you know, you've got London, Manchester, and then right in the north, you've got this beautiful little place called Newcastle, and it's got such a thriving scene. But if you think about it, if all of the people are in like London, King's Cross, like scouting talent, like because they do A&Rs, go out and they listen to people and they see people rising in London all the time. So people like Dave and Stormzy, for instance, they were all kind of in that growth of like grime and, you know, Skepta coming through as well. Like there was a lot of that all blowing up at once. So I think the momentum here is just massive. So like if you get picked up in London, it tends to be like a pretty fast movement. But because Newcastle is so far from that, it's hard for like A&Rs to be around in Newcastle. There's not really a huge, I mean, there's obviously Northern Baby, which I assume are a record label. So I'm not sure if they've got an A&R department, but someone like Sony or Warner, You know, they've got like A&R scouts that are like paid, and that's their whole job, is to like scout talent. You have loads of people coming through TikTok. Like, it's just like, where, I suppose you got to think of it as a business, like where's the money going to be? So people saw Sam and he was like, he's going to be massive. But he was picked up by BBC Introducing and stuff like that. So there's so much infrastructure, and I think maybe if there was more infrastructure in London and Newcastle, it would be a bit faster of an approach. But there's definitely people that are making mad moves. So like India Arkin is doing really well. She's not in Seoul, but she's like, you know, she's supporting Tom Grennan in the Boiler Shop. So it's definitely opportunities. I just feel like potentially there's just a lack of infrastructure. It's no one's fault. It's just where it's situated in the UK. It's just so far removed from all the funding, which is in London. I wish that like someone like Sony would like situate their offices and where they're based, like somewhere like Manchester, Leeds, Newcastle, but they're just London centric. It's a bit dead, to be honest. Like, they're just all here. Like, when I first moved to London, I realised that they're all in King's Cross and they're all kind of next to each other. It's mad, and you're like, this is why this is why no one sees the light of day, because you're all here like listening to London and only London. So yeah, we just need more money, resources, A&Rs, people that are in the industry, like in Newcastle, looking around, because the talent's there. It's just not getting picked up as easy. TikTok will change that. I'm not a TikToker, but you know, people pop off on TikTok.
In the noughties, it would have been very difficult for any urban act to make it. All of the avenues of support were focused solely on indie music and dance music. There wasn't any focus on urban music. So if you wanted to get support from the likes of Generator, you had to go in on a Thursday between 2 and 4, because that was the only day that Wayne C. McDonald was in to talk to urban acts. Whereas if you were any other genre of music, you could go in anytime to speak to anyone, because they had a whole list of things that they could help you with. But with the urban thing, it was kind of, I'll listen to your album. Yeah, it's a good album, and that was the end of the help for an urban act. It was great to have that support, but it could have been a lot more, and it could have been a lot more of a push. It's the same with the radio. I don't think that BBC Introducing supports urban music enough. I think they play a lot of indie music, a lot of dance music, and back then they didn't play any urban music. No one got a look in. Now they play a little bit more, but I still think there could be a massive improvement. It's very rare to see Northeast hip hop acts on at the big festivals, but they do select the Northeast indie acts quite a lot and the dance acts a lot. So it would be nice to see some more Northeast acts from hip hop world on at the big radio ones, big weekender, because you give everyone else a slot, so why not the urban acts as well?
Everyone needs to come together and work together. I think when everyone comes together, it makes a bigger impact. And I think it's definitely starting to happen now. Like, I know we've got songwriters in Newcastle that have like been nominated for Grammys, and we've got producers that have got like millions and millions of streams. So it's like, if everyone can come together, work together and push it, it'll make more noise. And I think as well, like with us, so when we put on CC's headline show, we got artists from London, artists from Manchester, industry people like photographers from London, and just to make noise about it, so it was more on social media and people could see it was a thing. And I think that now when we have events, people want to come up for it and like want to come up from London, see what's happening here. And I think it will be a case of us as well having to go to London to showcase that talent at like events and stuff. But I think eventually like people will know it, and as again, I think it's marketing, like put some paid ads on videos when they're coming out. And generally, like even journalists picking up stories on it, because journalists pick up stories on, you know, the indie artists and the electronic scene and the tech scene, but I think generally the rap, Afrobeats and R&B is still quite untapped in that sense.
The way I think the Northeast hip hop scene differs from other regions in the UK, I think up north there's a big focus on rock, indie rock, jazz, soul. I think, you know, that's the music that the Northeast was more exposed to for a longer period of time. We've had, you know, big rock artists and indie artists come out of here as well. You know, Sam Fender. We had, you know, James Arthur come out from the Northeast as well. So it's one of them things that people have been more exposed to it, and I think due to that, people haven't been as exposed to hip hop. I think hip hop and rap are still making their way up here. However, you know, ever since I started there seems to be a lot more focus on hip hop than when I first started. I think there's a lot more hip hop events. I think there's a lot more hip hop artists, and I do think that the internet had a big impact on that, because people are now naturally exposed to hip hop. Pretty much, you know, wherever they go, you will see hip hop in the media, because it is the #1 genre in the world. It is, you know, the biggest artists out right now who are selling the most are hip hop artists. So I think naturally, you know, the younger generations, my generation, and perhaps even the generations above me, they're being more and more exposed to it, and they have more of an understanding of what it is. And I think because of that, it's starting to bubble up, and I think, you know, I think it's a really exciting time for hip hop right now in the Northeast.
So Generator collaborates with other industry stakeholders like venues and festivals and funders across the UK. One of the really great initiatives that we've launched recently is our Music Industry Advisory Group, and that's 18 industry professionals from across the UK who have agreed to give some of their time for free. For example, they're all providing 12 hours of mentoring to Northeast artists. So that's our Music Industry Advisory Group, which is recently launched, and it's incredible because you can apply to talk to any of the 18 people, and like they're people from record labels, they're A&R professionals, they are funding professionals, like specialists in funding, they're artists themselves who have been really successful, live sector and touring specialists, producers, so there's a huge range.
I think one of the main ways to bridge the gap is for people to take responsibility and accountability. I'm talking about the promoters, the event makers, all these types of people that are putting shows and events on around the country where they put 5 acts from London on and not 1 act from the Northeast. That needs to change. Some people need to take ownership now and realise it's not a novelty act. We don't just have Sam Fender here and there's no room for anybody else now in the music industry or in the spotlight. There is a whole, I don't know how to say it, there's a lot of artists right now in the Northeast, all good enough to be on the main stage somewhere, and I think that's one of the main reasons we haven't had as much publicity up here as we should have, is because our artists haven't had the main stage as much as they should have in the past, but now we're seeing that change.
The best way that we can bridge the gap between Newcastle, Manchester, London, Liverpool, Edinburgh is building that creative network and building that infrastructure. So as we are doing more and more of our national partnerships, Generators building the reputation of the Northeast first of all. So Newcastle it's always been on the map, but Newcastle is even more so a place where people know that the music industry is thriving. Another way that gap's going to be closed between Newcastle and London is by better partnerships with like major labels. Having that direct link with those major labels from Newcastle will mean that our campaigns for our artists will reach a wider audience, and the relationships that we have with other organisations that do the same thing as us but in other cities, like building those relationships and making those relationships stronger. Like there's another talent development agency called Come Play With Me, there's one called Brighter Sound, like they're kind of Manchester and Leeds based, but they're all over the UK, and as we build those stronger connections, our artists benefit because they get to go to those cities, because we're able to directly introduce them to one another. So that gap will get smaller and smaller as we build our relationships and our connections with other cities and other organisations doing the same thing.
I think PR can help to bridge the gap by simply concentrating on the people and the backgrounds of where they've come from, i.e. the northeast of England. If you keep on talking about how good the northeast is, that it's a breeding ground for good musicianship, that eventually will filter through to London. So that's one way of doing it, simply by shouting out about how good we are in the Northeast, and there's some great talent up here.
I think we could bridge the gap by like investing in Newcastle as a place. I think it has some investments. It's got the Art Council all over it. It's got like, you know, youth music with Generator. They do loads of stuff for music. They're doing great. But I think we just need London to become decentralized as a music scene, and it's difficult because there's so many venues here. This is where the A&Rs are, but we need like the record labels to like bridge the gap by like seeing the value in that scene and actually investing in more of that infrastructure in Newcastle, and, you know, like really investing in the North as a real hub for like amazing musicians, not just indie, like soul. But yeah, in general, just need to bridge the gap, give us more money, give us more time, give us more influence, and then, yeah, I feel like we'll start to get some traction, I think.
I think that we can bridge the gap by, I think, working with like the major organisations. So I think it'll take for people like, you know, Spotify and Apple Music, even like the big radio stations, to like identify and realise that they need to connect with us up here. There's so much talent up here, and I think that we might not necessarily have as much access to like playlisting and stuff like that. But I think if there's people like myself and Generator, and everyone else that is trying to make effort to really connect the dots between the major players, then I think it will all happen over time. As long as we are pushing our like best talent that is the best quality, they'll take us seriously. So I think as long as we are like putting the best work out there, that will gain the recognition and people can see that we are doing it properly and professionally, I think it will all happen. It's just a case of like those big companies realising what is happening, and I think that's a case of like, I know a lot of artists now are investing in marketing more, which is gonna push more, get more eyes on from like outside of Newcastle. And I think just generally, like as I say, everyone working together, and as soon as everyone does that, it just makes more noise. And Newcastle itself, like there's such a big student community here, so there's so many people that are coming from London to live here, coming from Manchester to live here. If we're making a noise and then they go back home to their friends in Manchester and London and say, look what's happening in Newcastle, then eventually it will all just develop.
So I mean, the job of bridging the gap between the Northeast and the rest of the country, I think is firstly being done by people like Northern Baby Records, who are giving it a really good shot at making something exciting in this city. And I think the way forwards is more people like them, more people building out and bringing artists together, rather than disparate sort of gigs where, you know, often even if they're all in the same genre, you'll have like really hard rap next to R&B. It's like we need to kind of niche down a little bit, I think, in this area in terms of what people are actually going to see. So like, for instance, Chloe and I have plans to be running an R&B night this year, hopefully, with the sole intention of just making it so just R&B artists play, because we don't think there is a future in getting audiences to come into the city to watch like one R&B artist and then one drill artist. It doesn't really make sense. And I think, yeah, bridging the gap is going to be more Northern Babies all doing exactly what Northern Baby are doing, which is trying to break artists and be consistent. And I mean, I think that's something I hope to see more of in the next couple of years, is more small startups in this area enabling contemporary music to thrive, because that's the only way that I think we'll see a movement from around here. I think otherwise it's just going to be single rappers, and maybe one will sort of make it, maybe one won't. But without some kind of focused community, I don't see how this scene could gain traction. That's not to say there isn't lots of talent, but that talent requires other talent is the best way I can put it. Like, no talented artist is an island, and you need other talented artists to push you up. And they are there, but I think the venues for them to meet each other are quite limited. And I think that leads to less opportunities. And you know, the only way that's going to change is if there are more opportunities from more Northern babies putting on more nights, creating more opportunities.
If we are truly going to bridge the gap, we need to start working together more. We need the Northeast urban scene to have more collaboration. We need artists to be performing more gigs. We need more opportunities given to them. We need Generator and BBC Introducing and Spark Sunderland to be making sure that these artists' musics are played, and these artists need to make sure that these people have your music. The magazines like Narc and Crack need to also be looking at urban scenes. They focus solely on indie music and the occasional review of an urban act. It can be frustrating in the Northeast being an urban act. Matter of fact, it's crossed my mind personally to leave the Northeast just so I wasn't in the catchment area for the Northeast BBC Introducing. It's crossed my mind and a couple other people's as well. It's a tough time when your music doesn't get the support it should. I know for years that I haven't had the support that I deserved from the Northeast gatekeepers, and I now know that there's many artists in the Northeast who feel like the gate has been shut on them, but are successful in so many other cities, so many other places. They've got so many contacts that play their music all the time in other countries, but for some reason their local station won't play them. It's a bit corrupt, really.
I think it would be great if Newcastle put on more nights for original music. I think that is a bit of a difference in London. There's non-stop nights and events and stuff and sessions and jams and stuff like that for people to get up and show who they are. I think in Newcastle, not that I've really seen, like there is buskers and stuff which are cool, but it's not so much about original music. And I think obviously as an artist writing original music, you want that to be heard by people so that you can progress and move forward. So I think maybe if there was more opportunities for stuff like that, even networking events, I think opportunities like that would definitely be a way of bridging the gap to some extent. I do think one brilliant thing about Newcastle is everyone is so supportive of each other. I think every musician knows everyone, and even if it's not their cup of tea, they'll still like show their appreciation, and I think it's a lovely scene in that sense. I just think it needs more drive behind it, and that might make a difference.
But in order to bridge the gap between the both of them, I feel like the main thing that's missing is the support. And it's not just the support from people who want to go out to the shows, but it's the support from the people who are really doing things. Do you know what I mean? It's the promoters. That's the people that we need the support from, because in London, the people who are running some of the best venues are the ones who are pushing for the UK music scene. And that's why it's so strong, because they're giving them the platform, and then they're able to work with the best artists, and they all work together collaboratively, and that's what makes it so beautiful. And I feel like for Newcastle to catch up, we have to be doing the same thing. The venues that people are queuing to go inside of are the venues that need to be supporting the scene. They're the ones that need to be putting on nights. They're the ones that need to be booking artists to perform, or putting on a specific night for live music, because it's the sought after venues that people want to be in. They're the ones that need to really support it, because it's all good and well like the unknown venues that nobody really knows about booking you. That's cool and everything, and obviously support is support regardless, but in order to reach the wider community, it needs to be a bigger name. And I feel like once we start getting appreciation from, well, not just appreciation, but the support from these bigger venues and these people who are able to do bigger things in the city, I feel like that's when we'll see the difference, because they've got the connections and they've got the clientele that that could help these artists as well.